Welcome everyone to our February meetup with Greg Spots. We'll get underway in just a couple of minutes, but I'll do some quick announcements. Right, I am Doug Trum, Executive Director at the Urbanist. I'm really excited to have this great conversation tonight. We have Greg Spots up, the SDOT Director, and there's a lot happening right now. There is a Vision Zero review happening. We'll talk about that, and a lot of, I think, demand in the city for better ways to get around, and linking that to really good housing options as well. Having done this for a long time at the Urbanist, we've always tried to make the connections between the two, and I think we're starting to feel that message is really connecting on all levels. We're seeing the state talking about zoning more than they ever have, and it looks like those bills are going places, hopefully. But before I step on all our conversation here, some updates for stuff to look forward to on the next few meetups. We have Tammy Morales. We just got the confirmation there, March 14th. That's our next meetup. That will also be virtual. The link is on our website now. Register, suggest a question there as well. We're excited that Tammy Morales is one of the 2 and maybe 3 council members is going to run for re-election. She represents D2, where that's the epicenter of the Vision Zero, safety crisis. So she's been a leader on that issue. Kind of connects to our conversation tonight. Maybe that'll continue when we talk with her. Sure it will. It's a very important issue around the city, but especially D2. So look for that event. April, we're still lining up a speaker. And then May, we have Sound Transit CEO Julie Tim, which will also be a great conversation. And also a ton happening on that right now. We have been covering that as far as what is the SD3 plan. We might talk about that tonight as well, since SDOT has a big role in making sure the connections to the stations are strong and kind of influencing Sound Transit and where those stations should go. So Julie will have more clarity at that point, because the big to do about that is in March the board is supposed to kind of lock in the options for the DEIS, or the next phase of the EIS, environmental impact statement. So we'll be talking SD3. We'll be talking Sound Transit issues all around the region, from escalators and elevators, getting those working better, all of that. And judging by the questions we received from tonight, that's definitely an issue that many of you are interested in, the accessibility of the transit and having good transit. And we'd love for your support to put on more events like these. It takes a lot of staff time to, make sure this event goes well, plan good topics, and make sure the coverage on the website's good, so that can kind of guide our topics. And Ryan Packer's been doing an amazing job. Please donate if you're able to, both the Ryan Packer's Patreon, which they share on their Twitter, which you probably follow if you're following transportation, and also to us. You can see it on the website, and also reach out if you're interested in other options. My email is doug@theurbanist.org. If you're interested in volunteering, reach out to editor@theurbanist.org. If you're interested in editing or writing or photography, graphics, any of that, we'd love to get you plugged in. But for now, I better keep us moving along. I will pass it over to Ryan briefly, and then we'll get it over to Greg. So thanks so much for joining us, and definitely reach out if you're interested in getting involved or donating or learning more.
Thanks so much, Doug, and for that intro. My name is Ryan Packer. I'm a transportation reporter here at the Urbanist, and I'm very excited to welcome Greg Spots, Director of the Sales Department of Transportation, who joined the agency last year after a long career in Los Angeles. I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Greg for a little introductory remarks. If everyone can just go ahead and mute your end so we don't have any background noises here. and we're going to get to a brief. I'm going to do some questions that I have here to sort of keep within this themes, and then we're going to get to your questions after that. The floor is yours, Greg.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you, Doug. And I actually would like to start by sort of thanking the Urbanist as a publication and all the membership, and maybe even the broader community that's plugged into this stuff. I find the Urbanist to be a very important source of information, even though I have access to lots of inside information. And I'm, reading the coverage and learning a lot. And it's been especially helpful for me coming from somewhere else. This is my second career and I practiced it all in one city, basically. And so I didn't know how to just drop into a leadership position in a city that I didn't know that much about. I do feel that I outworked the other candidates for this job in terms of doing homework. I watched like every meeting of the transportation committee and every presentation SDOT had done over the last 6 months. And I read a lot of things, including the Urbanist, so it's been important to me in this entire journey. And I find it really exciting that there's so much civic engagement and excitement around transportation and placemaking and housing in Seattle. It's a really exciting place to practice your craft. I do want to mention too, Ryan, I really appreciate your reporting. There aren't too many people like you. You bring a kind of mix of passion and precision that don't always go together. And then impeccably deep research. My staff thinks you're one of the most knowledgeable people about transportation in the whole region, so I really enjoy, the work that you're doing. Let me start a little bit about sort of how this journey has been going, for me. I wanted to get to know Seattle because I thought, how can I be making decisions about Seattle without knowing the neighborhoods and knowing the people? It was an experiment to launch a little web link to see if people wanted to invite me to walk, bike, or ride transit in their neighborhood. And 180 small groups of people signed up. Nobody expected that on my staff. And I've been starting every weekday, Monday to Thursday, with a field visit the entire 5.5 months that I've been in the job. It's literally kind of become a new way to practice my craft. I was always very field oriented in LA, but it was ad hoc. It was, hey, today I've got a break between a couple of meetings. I'm going to hop in my city truck and go out and visit some crews. But now it's like systematized. And one thing beyond the benefits of getting to know people, getting to know the places, the rest of my day is informed by these things that I experienced in the morning. Like instead of starting in the digital space with emails and Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints and pictures about the streets, I'm starting on the streets. And I actually want to keep practicing my craft in this way. I feel like I'm constantly bringing up to people in the course of my meetings in the afternoon and the late morning, things I heard recently from real Seattleites on the streets or things that I saw. And it's been kind of further enhanced by coming here without bringing a car because I'm transit dependent. I use Lyft and Uber here and there, mostly on like a rainy night or something, or if I really have to get somewhere early in the morning and it's the fastest way to go. But most of my trips, other than walking, are on the bus. And I've learned quite a lot about the bus system. I really like the bus system. I'm actually very impressed with the bus system. I know that we're short on drivers. I know that the bus system isn't what it was pre-pandemic, but living in South Lake Union, it is very, very useful and handy and terrific. I've been really impressed by the staff. The SDOT staff are very smart, highly educated, very knowledgeable in their fields, and very passionate about making Seattle more walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly, safer, greener, and more climate resilient. I'm a very passionate person. I'm very bubbly. I feel like a lot of my job is to inspire and motivate staff. The staff is pretty darn inspired even before I got here. So I have felt that part of what I need to do then is to provide clarity on the goals. If the staff is really smart and really motivated, how can I make sure they have clear goals, they have crisp deadlines, they're going to meet those deadlines? How can I create almost like a better system for these smart, passionate people to work in? Sometimes when you work in government, people say, oh, good people, lousy system. And I don't really believe in that, because the people create the system, right? I mean, the system is a creation of people. But I kind of felt like, as I spent a few months here, very good people, okay system. Not lousy system, but a system that has opportunities to improve. And I decided that I wanted to create a theme for 2023 that could focus these smart people. And the theme is delivery, fast and flavorful, in concert with our values. And the idea is that there isn't a lot of fresh money in the city budget. There are lots of really wonderful grant opportunities at the state and federal level. It may be one of the richest moments ever for those opportunities, between like new climate money at the state level and the infrastructure bill at the federal level. But at the local level, we had a revenue reduction forecast in the middle of the budget process that people weren't used to seeing that. So I felt our staff should really be focusing on delivering what we're budgeted and planned to do, and delivering that on time, but also flavorfully. And we've actually had some interesting, like, divisional all staffs where people are putting up on the whiteboard, what does Greg mean by flavorful? And like, people are, everybody's giving the adjective that they think I mean. And it's been actually a really good exercise in like, what's the essence of what we're doing? Like, how do we, deliver without sanding off the best parts? I don't mean to push delivery and then deliver a mediocre product, or service. And so we're having a really great discussion on sort of, what's the essence of it? And let's make sure that in the process of delivering and doing deep community outreach, we're not like losing the best parts of it. I want to implement, world-class emerging best practices in urban design. And I want Seattle to actually be a leader in some of those things. And I think it's sometimes in the past, Seattle has. So it's been really helpful to establish that theme. And then I have told everybody the only new positions or position improvements that I'm willing to consider this year are position changes that drive delivery. Don't come to me with I need a new staffer to do this, or I want to take this person and bump them up a level. Don't come to me with that unless you can make the case to me on how that improves delivery. So the first one that we've done, the first position change that's happened in the course of my tenure, is we looked at the project development division that Jim Curtin runs, and that's where projects go from concept to 30% design. That's where a lot of the flavor gets inserted in the beginning. And we appointed a deputy for Jim that is just focused on deadlines and deliverables, like the Gantt chart wizard for the PDD division. And that's an idea that I had to really make sure that, if 30% design is supposed to be 30 days away, this deputy is calling everybody, you're 30 days out. What are you missing? Is there something you need from another part of this agency, from another agency, from an outside entity? Do you need leadership from Greg? Are you having a roadblock with community? Do you need help from communications or the mayor's office? And, kind of assessing delivery risks and debugging them in advance. And I'm really excited about the potential for that. I've also taken the South Seattle bike projects and clustered them as a director's special. And I now have a member of the executive team monitoring every aspect of those projects and reporting to me on developments in real time about those projects. I really want to prove that we are delivering excellent bike projects in South Seattle on an aggressive timeline. And so I'm personally getting involved in those to the extent that I can help speed them up. I walked Beacon Hill with the folks who are upset about the parking that's coming out. And, they asked me to delay the project for 6 months, and I said no. But I said, I'm willing to bring the best minds in parking in this agency to help you with how the side street parking could be better organized to support the parking needs of the residents. And that brings me to my last thing I wanted to mention before I kick it back to Ryan. That was one of the moments where I started thinking, you know, we need to bring an enterprise approach to our greatest challenges. Like SDOT has so many different divisions and people and functions. And when we have I would argue, I'm sure everybody here would agree, that the Beacon Hill bike lane is a regionally significant project. It is a special, flat, and relatively narrow and safe way where cyclists could get from, you know, Southeast Seattle to downtown and points farther. And when we have a project of that significance, everybody in every division has to be ready to jump in and help out. It can't just live under like one project manager who's a middle manager. We have to commit all of SDOT to deliver that. And people are starting to respond to that. You know, and my deputies who have these like large verticals are starting to collaborate more. We're doing that on, you know, the Ballard 15th Avenue, you know, paving project. I walked it with a really large set of staff and said, you know, let's try to figure out, are there, you know, walking, biking, or transit enhancements that we can bring here? And I challenged everybody to think about what those are and figure out what other outside money would be needed to finance some of those. We haven't landed on the solution yet, but it's in the context of that, like, let's bring the whole enterprise. Let's bring like everybody to the table and figure out, you know, what folks can bring. And maybe that's how to make projects more flavorful. So I'm really, you know, going to enjoy answering your questions. And I really appreciate all of your passion and advocacy and the deep knowledge that people have here. Hi to some of my, you know, friends on Twitter who are on here. Hi to some people who I then got to meet in person who originally were friends of mine on Twitter here. I'm familiar with maybe 30% of the names in the room here, maybe more. Probably some of you have different Twitter handles and I don't know your real name. I don't know. But I really enjoy, you know, interacting with this community.
Greg, I'm going to circle back to some of the stuff you mentioned there. I think we can get into, probably talk for 2 hours about it. But for the people who kind of are trying to get a sense of what you're all about, and sort of the way that your fingerprints are on projects isn't really showing up quite yet in terms of what they can see on the ground. Kind of want to go back to your time in LA. What are the projects that you are excited to go back and check out that you worked on when you were down and working in LA for over a decade? What are the things that you sort of are glad that you were able to do?
You know, it was so interesting because when I moved from Mayor Viragosa's transportation team into the Public Works, into the Bureau of Street Services, and this is in the late 2012, the Bureau of Street Services was a automotive focused agency. It was an agency focused on maintaining the road surface. The only two metrics we reported back to the mayor's office on a monthly basis were miles paved and the number of potholes that were fixed. We maintained 700,000 street trees and there were no metrics pertaining to that. We maintained the sidewalks to the extent that the city did when the property owner is responsible for a lot of that, but we were in charge of curb ramps. There were no metrics. There were no pedestrian oriented metrics whatsoever that were played back to the mayor's office. And even though, you know, we did a lot of things like build bus landings and bus pads, there were no transit related metrics either. And I started out as kind of a early and somewhat lonely voice for making LA more walkable, bikeable, and transit friendly. And over a long period of time, like the whole decade that I was there, gradually the agency became more and more oriented to that, to the point where in the last 2 years I was there, we won like $200 million worth of grants that were all projects to make LA more walkable, bikeable, transit friendly, greener, and climate resilient. And I can't wait to go back and like see how those projects are implemented. It's going to take years to implement some of them. I did the groundbreaking on one. Do you know how here the east-west streets are harder to navigate, both on bike or on transit? Same in downtown LA. And there's this critical, most of them are one way, but there's this critical two-way street called 7th that really is like the east-west spine of the downtown. And we got money to build a bike lane and do a whole bunch of pedestrian improvements all the way across 7th, like from deep into sort of like the kind of like industrial toy district all the way through the various neighborhoods of downtown and getting to the red line stop, the 7th and Metro, which is the primo like transit hub in the city. And so I can't wait to go back and see that one, because I worked in downtown for 14 years. My partner, Susanna, lived in downtown in the first 4 years that we were together until we moved in together. So I've spent a lot of time, part-time living there. So I'm really, really excited about that project. But Ryan, there's so many others. I mean, the fact that there are dozens of streetscape projects for bikes and pedestrians and greening astounds me, considering where the agency was when I got there. I also was able to double the size of the urban forestry division. There were 94 people in that division when I joined, and there are now 240 people in that division. And I'm so proud of that. I built that up 10 positions at a time, just going to council, like, let's get a dead tree removal crew going because there's 8,000 standing dead trees that are a hazard. Let's get another one. Let's go from, only contracting the tree trimming to bringing it in-house. And we built up to like 7 in-house crews. Let's get an environmental specialist who can look at the EIR stuff pertaining to sidewalks. Let's try to, preserve in place healthy mature trees when we're removing sidewalks. There's just so many ways in which the culture and the orientation of the agency changed. I'm not at all the only one who is trying to change it, but I think I was probably the first one. And like, the city was the city's needs, the public's demands, the councils, the politics around the council was changing. I mean, by the end, the council stopped asking us about the road surface maintenance anymore. And all their questions were about walking, biking, transit, and trees. But that was a really exciting thing to be part of. And this is very different. This is, SDOT's an agency that's really interested in all these things before I got here. But I do feel that I can be a kind of fireball of energy and excitement to keep the flames going on this stuff.
Getting into Seattle, there's a phrase that we have in the city that I'm wondering if you've heard, called the Seattle process.
Familiar.
What does that mean to you? And what have you inferred that means, I should say, over the first few months of your being here?
There's something it means to me that I'm trying to push back on, which is we endlessly litigate whether the project should even be done at all, even when it's at 60% design or 90% design, or even when construction started. And I don't like the idea of legitimizing that project opponents get 5-6 different bites at the apple to like attack the essential nature of the project. I really believe, and I've been teaching this to my staff, like in the early concept stage, let's have a very wide funnel. Let's have, deep, multifaceted outreach. Let's find stakeholders that didn't know that they could express themselves. Let's go multilingual. Let's put a table out with Chinese language staff in Uwajimaya and see what people want to tell us. But as we move through the design process, we should be resolving design questions. And once they're resolved and a decision is made, we should stop litigating that decision. If we decided the bike lane is on the east side of the street and it's a 2-way cycle track, and that's how we got to 30% design, let's stop arguing about that with the same people who didn't want it over there. Like, SDOT as a team and ultimately the executives made a decision for the best interest of the project, the best interest of the city. and let's move on, and let's have outreach to the extent that there are open issues as the design funnel narrows, rather than just kind of feeling some sort of deep guilt, like, well, why don't I give this person who didn't want to lose this one parking space like the 5th opportunity to say so? Because really often it costs a lot of money if you keep opening up these decisions. I mean, staff time costs money. It even costs money to have the conversation over. So I'm really encouraging folks, let's have a more comprehensive, multicultural, transparent and equity-oriented outreach to all possible stakeholders in the beginning. And then let's make decisions and communicate those decisions clearly to everyone so that everybody knows when we've reached a decision, hit a milestone, and then we keep going. What do you think about that?
Well, my question is the department moving at different speeds in different neighborhoods? Because there's a new phrase I'm kind of starting to hear from public officials more, which is moving at the speed of trust. And that sort of implies that going as fast as the community is able to find acceptable. But ultimately, we've been talking about how to build a north-south bike lane through Southeast to connect to Southeast Seattle since 2019. And so is that the way?
I have not been promulgating that.
Yeah.
I've been saying, set deadlines for the design process and each milestone, communicate to the community what those deadlines are, seek input about decisions that are going to be made at the next milestone, and then hit that deadline and keep going. And I even put a person into project development division, as I mentioned earlier, to do exactly that.
And so one of the first things you did when you got the job is you had this 90-day Vision Zero review, internal, so-called top to bottom. We are past the 90 days. Is the review becoming a microcosm of an SDOT project?
No. No, and it's all going to work out just fine. I have to give staff credit. They got me a draft of the review in 90 days. I commissioned it on my first day, September 7th. But it took us a couple of weeks to staff it because we had a competitive process to staff it. So it was staffed in early October. They got me a very rough draft right before Christmas, and then they got me a better draft the end of the first week of January. There were a couple things that I wanted to make a little bit better in it once I had a chance to digest it in mid-January. I had originally thought just to share it as is, hey, here's what staff gave to me, and community, you can co-review it as I'm reviewing it. But I thought it could be organized and presented in a way that's a little more readable for a general interest audience. And I, asked for some revisions in not the content, but the way it's presented. So it was easier to read and understand and navigate. And then, we got some news that we might get this federal grant, the Safer Streets grant. And it seemed like the report could almost be instantly outdated if it dropped in mid-January, and then 10 days later, we found out we can double the size of the Vision Zero program. The grant we got, 25.6 million plus 5 million in obligated local match, is almost $31 million in projects. It'll take several years, maybe 3 years, to implement those. And we're currently spending 8.3 million this year on Vision Zero projects. So it basically doubles the output of Vision Zero. And I thought the review will be kind of obsolete or outdated in some way. if it isn't informed by whether we got this money or not. The third thing is, and I know this is a little bit confusing, right? Because you guys are impatient to see it, but I know that even more so, you're impatient for action. And the report had a lot of strategies, and it described where the strategies, the types of places where those strategies could be implemented, but it didn't put dots or lines on a map as to where to do them. But the grant application does. The grant application that was submitted last September has 110 or so locations, 95% of which are in underserved communities. And a grant is really like more of a plan. The grant application represents more of a plan than the top to bottom review. And I've been asking staff over the last few weeks, are there some early momentum actions we could start almost immediately upon releasing the top to bottom review that would kind of kick us into high gear to actually be delivering stuff? So these are the three reasons why it's taken a little bit longer. We have excellent alignment between SDOT and the mayor's office. We've made those revisions to the report. We just finished having the legal review that was needed. And we're literally looking for a date on the mayor's calendar to have an event where we release it and announce potentially a few, a handful of early momentum actions that we could commit to getting going right away. And also get some public comment on as the public digests the top to bottom review itself. So that's what's happening, and it won't be very long before you have the opportunity to read it and learn about these early momentum actions that we hope to propose.
Are the contents of that report going to be a surprise to anyone on this call in terms of, I think it's pretty clear where people are getting hurt on our streets. And so I guess, and some people have kind of been trying to tease this out in the chat comments in terms of strategies versus, like you said, a list of projects. You mentioned the 15th Avenue repaving project. We published the Complete Streets checklist from that project on the Urbanist. We've had a Complete Streets ordinance since 2007. We're one of the first cities in the US to do that. I guess my question is why that didn't get us to where you thought we needed to be on that project. So that's kind of the
Did you want me to answer that other thing about the surprises first?
I think they were kind of related, but if you want to.
So I don't think that knowledgeable people about urban design and street safety will find many surprises in the top to bottom review or any. And it's aligned with the federal safe systems approach, which is also what informed the grant application. I think it will be not surprising and more reassuring that the department understands what the best practices are. And so in some ways, that's partly why I really want to have some actions to go with it. It could end up being that commissioning the report put a whole lot of drive around safety into my agency that may have more impact than the actual report itself. It may turn out when Ryan writes the history of this a year from now or 2 years from now, that it was kind of like a shot across the bow about safety is my number one priority. And it is a stressful experience to have staff who don't work on Vision Zero evaluate your work, like really knowledgeable top flight staff among our team. They both have masters in public policies and have really distinguished careers. So, so then Ballard, I need to keep learning about that. That's a great question, Ryan. And, I know that there's different buckets of money, right? And although there's a complete streets policy and checklist, there's a budget for like arterial paving, and that budget doesn't necessarily pay for like all kinds of mobility goodies. We may have to bring other programs, to the party, in order to make a more, add some complete streets elements to those type of projects. And I haven't been around long enough to totally understand all the internal mechanics, but this is kind of where I'm coming back to that SDOT as an enterprise approach. I want the paving people to be thinking about pedestrians and cyclists and the bus stops. And I also want the sidewalks people to be thinking about the healthy, mature street trees. I actually had an influence on the agency before I got here, because in early August, I asked everybody to pause on removing those beautiful trees on Aurora between 80th and 85th. I said, I looked at some of the, conversation on Twitter. I went on Google Street View, and like, there's a total shortage of healthy, mature trees on Aurora. These are some of the best trees in a 60-block stretch on Aurora. If you look at the satellite view, these are some of the only proper shade trees. And I'm just asking you guys, don't take them out till I get here. I don't have any authority yet. I'm not the director, but could you humor me and wait for me? And when I came, we developed a plan on retaining them. And it's really interesting because we did save the trees, but we opened up like new lines of communication that hadn't previously existed or that weren't strong enough between, the concrete crews and the forestry folks. And they're now starting to interact on projects that I have nothing to do with. Like, we opened this collaborative space where multiple variables are important. Yes, we have to make the sidewalks ADA, and we want to preserve healthy, mature trees. And now I'm finding out about other places around the city where this collaboration is occurring. So, I'm really working to build that, and, it's a work in progress.
One thing that you've kind of been highlighting a lot on your Twitter account is your work downtown around the Center City Connector. You're moving ahead with what you're calling the culture connector. Can you tell us a little bit about where we're at with that and what's going on?
Definitely. So, we don't have that many like $200 million projects that are, have an EIS and 100% design. And that's a real asset, in the agency. And, learning about that in my first couple of weeks here, I felt like I was just kind of bummed out about the way the streetcar was talked about, and, should we or shouldn't we, or no one seems to be able to green light it. And I thought, like, it's up to me to try to like give it a new hearing, a fresh hearing. And because I have this boots on the ground approach, I asked my staff to like send me a PowerPoint about it, and then let's walk it. Let's walk the entire alignment of the missing, segment from, Pioneer Square on Jackson all the way up First Avenue and over to where the South Lake Union one starts. And we walked it on just an utterly beautiful late September or early October Friday, like the last meeting of the day before daylight savings, just like during daylight savings, just like a beautiful long warm afternoon. And I felt like I saw something. As I walked up first, I saw that all three streetcar segments could be like a linear, cultural, entertainment, retail, and restaurant district. That could be, the animating catalyst for a lively downtown in an era of remote work. And I thought, how about the missing streetcar segments return on investment is economic and cultural, not just moving this many people for a mile. And I talked about a whole of government, a set of interventions and incentives to bring that district forward. I shared that with a couple of different important people on the mayor's team, and they ended up putting me in front of the mayor, and I pitched it to him, and he really liked it. And now and he loved the part about having different parts of that, U-shaped 3-section alignment, celebrate different cultural aspects of Seattle. You know, could we bring back the jazz scene that used to exist, you know, on Jackson and in Pioneer Square? You know, lift up all these opportunities to dine in the CID. You know, get people new kinds of access to the wonderful like nightlife and our LGBT community in Capitol Hill. You know, like I was just familiar enough with these neighborhoods to feel the richness across all 3 segments. And the mayor was really responded to the idea that when we say entertainment, restaurant, retail, and cultural, we don't mean corporate, bland, large. We mean like small, vibey, and local. He loved that. He's a, you know, multicultural product of Seattle himself. And so, you know, we've been working on it. And we're working on identifying funding to update the engineering work to set that project up to get moving again. That has been a lot of fun. And it's been a very interesting opportunity for me to bring a little bit of stranger eyes into the job and kind of maybe bring a little bit of thought leadership or vision. It's been a lot of fun, especially in the context of knowing that with the city's budget challenges, there's not going to be that many opportunities for me to like do something like that. And people have been very receptive. I've been leading these walks for various stakeholders on Thursday evenings. We could do a themed one for the Urbanist. That could be really fun. We could do that in the next, you know, month or two. And it's a kind of funny way to crowdsource public policy, like take people on a walk, talk to them about the vision, ask them what they think. And people have provided some really cool ideas. It's been really, really fun. So that's been a neat kind of highlight of the job in one way.
We have a lot of people here who submitted questions, so I want to get to those questions, a lot of which are great. Unfortunately, we won't have time to do all of them. Want to ask this one though. This says, nothing has radicalized me more against the dangers of automobiles in the past 7 years than pushing my kid's stroller and walking my kids in Ballard in my neighborhood. I saw you recently tweet about low traffic neighborhoods in London. Can you share more about any lessons you think are applicable for Seattle and how we can support low traffic neighborhoods?
Yeah, you know, I have a buddy in London who lives in one of these low traffic neighborhoods. So I first experienced it before I knew what it was. And basically the way it works is, and it's because London had this thing where I think under Thatcher, they were allowing people to buy their public housing, you know, buy their public housing unit and own it. And my friend who was a DJ there did that and still has it. So I was staying with him there. And basically there are these, I guess they call it modal filters, so that you can walk or bike right to the retail around the edge of the neighborhood, but you can't take your car in there. So like there's ways to get in by car, but it's limited and you can't really easily drive across or through the whole thing. So it's kind of porous to cyclists and pedestrians and you and your kid within the stroller. And they're finding in London and the outlying areas of suburbs that are doing this, that like, I think they've had reductions of like 20-30% in vehicle traffic inside of these low traffic neighborhoods. And yet the traffic on the arterials isn't really changing. So like the theory is that incrementally people are making different modal choices. Because it's really easy to walk or bike to what they call the high street, right? The commercial street with shops and restaurants and coffee. And why bother driving there and trying to find a parking space when it's so pleasant and easy to walk there? So I'm really intrigued by that. I don't know. It's like one way to implement the 15-minute city. I haven't yet, you know, tried to figure out exactly how that might apply in Seattle, but in our in the executive directive, to reduce the carbon emissions of transportation, there is a provision in there to look at like low traffic neighborhoods or low emission neighborhoods or low pollution neighborhoods And it'll be interesting to see, maybe we can put forth a menu of different types of opportunities and see if some communities raise their hand and say, I'd like to try this one or that one.
Front of some of that modal filtering in terms of if you've seen those Capitol Hill streets that are very popular, but ultimately we have backed away from kind of doing that with neighborhood greenways.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth more conversation. And I wonder, maybe it's better, instead of imposing it, to create like a toolkit of different kinds of opportunities and invite neighborhoods to raise their hand and say they want to try this one or try that one or pilot this, because then maybe you have more support. But my whole life, like I owned a townhouse for 3 years in LA. The rest of the time I've been a renter. I'm always renting for walkability. That's my number one criteria. I've literally lived in like, a 15-minute city situation my whole adult life, by choice.
I have a question here about South Seattle. There are 1,000 units currently in various stages of development along MLK and Rainier, our most dangerous streets. However, pedestrian and bike safety projects, including accessible Mount Baker, have stalled. How can SDOT speed up design and approval of these projects so we can have safe neighborhoods in South Seattle?
Right. I mean, that's been a question I've been pursuing myself. And this is actually, this is an area where the community on here and on Twitter was really helpful, right? Like, there was a delay announced on the Beacon Hill project. It hadn't filtered up to me. I didn't know the delay was happening. I learned about it at the same time the rest of you learned about it. And people were really, really upset. And they were upset beyond that project. They were upset about a history of delays and inability to deliver, these type of projects, in South Seattle. And that's why I made some rearrangements internally and clustered up all of those projects, those 4 north-south bike projects as a one director's special cluster, and put one of my executive team on it. And now I'm available to actually go out in community and work with stakeholders if they need to take it all the way to my level, to debug them. So, I'm really, really focused on that. And I can only do that on so many projects. We won't do delivery fast and flavorful if everything has to come up to me. That's going to slow everything down. So I have to be very strategic about where I can add value. I'll eventually prove it to you by getting those projects moving. But today I'm asserting to you that in the limited ability I have to personally involve myself with projects, that's at the top of my list. And so is the Aurora project, the $50 million Aurora project. I told them I want to chair a meeting about that project every month. I want to personally be hearing how the project is progressing, who the consultant is selected, what the instructions that are being given to them. That's another one where I'm like really challenging everybody to think big and bring, design excellence to the program there.
Here's a question that a lot of people have, comes up a lot in SDOT meetings. Is there any channel for residents to report ways that infrastructure they frequently use is defective or flawed? For example, at a nearby intersection, we regularly see cars turning left across the bike lane with a green light. It feels like a design flaw that people are not realizing.
I mean, there's various channels to communicate with us, but there's a larger question that I'm working on answering, which is, can we have the capacity to fund making an improvement that's customer requested like that? We don't really have a slush fund of money to do that. And of course, if we're going to invest in underserved communities, if we became the Amazon of street improvements and gave everybody what they wanted, it would be more affluent, privileged people who asked for more stuff and got more stuff. But I think a public agency has to be responsive, innovative, transparent, and accountable. And so responsive is the very first word in my special 4 that I preach around when I was in LA and now. And it's something I even have to work with the mayor and council on, because our budget has more and more become very, very narrowly sliced to individual projects. And there's been a few programs that used to be constituent driven that, got phased out. So, we do need to figure out, like, I mean, people can alert us, but do we have the ability to actually respond?
That actually gets to a question that I had for you in terms of how robustly the department is sort of reacting to things on the ground, people getting hurt on a day-to-day basis. The state is kind of trying to do this right now with the governor's budget in terms of a fund that actually is for immediate projects that when safety needs come up, people realize that this street has a real problem. But being reactive is also not being proactive. So how do you balance those?
Yeah, I mean, that's really challenging. And there are various types of investigations that go on when there's a major incident, and there are remedial actions that are corrective actions that are taken sometimes, and often when we have a claim or lawsuit, there's an analysis of if a corrective action is needed. There's definitely a lot of interest in in fixing something that has been proven to not be safe. But yeah, I mean that is related to the previous question of how do we make sure that we're resourced to do that, especially if would we not fund a planned project in order to do that one that came up that we weren't expecting? I will say that we're really working hard on trying to identify a pathway to build that protected bike intersection at Dexter and Thomas. I loved that plan and I wanted to build it before the crash happened, but I want to do it even more now. And we have a lot of effort going on to try to figure out how to do that.
We got several questions about SDOT's plans around the North 130th Light Rail Station, sort of seen as a big opportunity, I think, by a lot of our readers. What's being done in that area?
I think I may need to have my staff get back to you on that. That's something I'm really interested in, but I haven't actually directly been involved in those details yet.
Got it. Or I can ask Doug to put our article on that, the grant that they applied for last year that I wrote about in the chat.
I have staff here on the call so that they can follow up questions that I don't readily have all the details of.
Okay, perfect. And so this question is pretty simple. What project are you most excited about happening this year?
When you say happening, does it have to be implemented this year, or that's just moving?
I'll let you decide.
I'm definitely, one of the things I'm most excited about is Aurora. Like I said on a podcast, Aurora is a policy failure. And one of our elected officials sent me that by text the next morning and said, fact, Aurora is a policy failure. Nobody likes Aurora. I haven't found a road in LA or Seattle that is as hated as how people currently feel about it. And I think Senator Reuven Carlisle did us as a city an amazing service and working with others on getting that funding for the Aurora project. And I just really I mean, MLK and Rainier are equally important. Rainier may be the most important street in the city to get right. But there's an opportunity to demonstrate a different kind of Aurora. I also have to say, I've done several walks on Aurora with community, and Lee is here, who was at one of those walks with me. The advocacy there is really sophisticated, and I just can't believe, like, every time I go there, how it is compared to everything to the east and west of it, So I'm really, and that's just, it's rare we get that much money to play with. But also, I'd like to say, I'm really excited about the rapid ride projects. Like, I'm really excited. I was on the waterfront this morning, and they were doing work on the rapid ride stop. When, like, that rapid ride C gets to, like, Alaska Way and turns south, and they were just putting up the H on there. And I was like, yes, the Delridge project is coming. Rapid Ride H is coming. All right. And, like, I've toured Rapid Ride G on Madison multiple times, and I really love that project. And the idea that you can, refresh 100-year-old water main and then pour a whole brand new street. And you've got all these 5-way intersections that were just such a mess in terms of their geometric design, totally auto-oriented. And every one of those 5-way diagonals gets redone for, like, safer crossings. I love that project, and I'm really jazzed about Rapid Ride J. And I've met different stakeholders on East Lake. I live walking distance from there, and I spend time on there recreationally, and I just think that could be really transformative. So, when we have a chance to go get federal money and use bus transportation as the sort of lever to do complete streets, I just find that, like, really, really exciting. But there's little things that excite me too. I mean, I walked kids to school at, oh my God, I can't remember. What's the name of the, Bailey Gatzert, in the CD, the second day public school started. And I said to my staff, there's not, like, an ADA way to get into the school. Like, the kids go through the driveway and they cross the car infrastructure for the teachers to park in order to get to the front door of the school. I was like, man, this is so 70s. And my staff goes and finds out that, like, they have a project on the shelf to, like, fix, hundreds of linear feet of sidewalk around that school. That project never got started. And they just went and greenlit it. And I got to go back there, like, I don't know, 6 weeks later, and walk the principal around and show all the brand new sidewalk that we put in. And how often in your life do you have a chance to do that? Like it's a stressful job, but there's a lot of satisfaction in the job when you can do something like that.
That dovetails with my final question for you, I think, ending on that note. This question reads, while it must be difficult to hear all the people who are unhappy and rarely the people who are, what methods do you hope to meaningfully channel that anger for rapid and transformative, lasting change?
I'm going to make a little bit of an oblique answer to that, but there's something I wanted to share with you that's related. So, we're doing a lot of outreach on the Seattle Transportation Plan, and we're doing new kinds of outreach. Like, we actually did a table at Uwajimaya with Chinese language staff, and there was a older Chinese American gentleman who interacted with staff in Chinese. And then the next day when we looked at the web stats, it was the first time that somebody had spent a half an hour on the Chinese language version of our STP website and done every one of the interactive activities. And I was like, yeah, that's bringing the table to people who don't even know that there's a table, and giving them a chance to weigh in. And you know what the result of this outreach is? Most of the votes are for the most aggressive scenario. the people, the hundreds of people who are interacting on Seattle Transportation Plan, they want rapid and large-scale change for a more walkable, bikeable, safer, greener city with better placemaking. And simultaneously with the other process that's going on about the comprehensive plan update, and you guys have covered this extensively, the bulk of people are saying abundant housing everywhere. So it's a really fascinating time in Seattle where there is so much energy and support for both, making our streets more walkable, bikeable, and transit friendly, and have housing and great places to hang out on our streets and public spaces. We have election results from the last 2 nights, whatever, that also indicate this kind of excitement. So I really think I may have joined as a Seattle resident at what might turn out to be an inflection point, like a critical inflection point in the city. Would you agree with that, Ryan and Doug?
Well, I would simply say that I think it sounds like those values you articulated are very closely aligned with the Urbanist, and that we're very excited to continue to report on those things. I really thank you for spending an hour with us tonight. I really am sorry I wasn't able to get to more of the questions. They were all really great. Really appreciate submitting them, and that everyone stuck with us for the entire hour. 50 people, pretty incredible, honestly, on a Wednesday night. Doug, did you have any final thoughts for our audience before we sign off?
I think I'll answer that last question, Greg, as well. And I think we really want to believe and really hope, and we're willing to do the work to help make that from our end. And I did see one of the questions in the chat. If you care to sneak in a final thing, a lot of activist energy here, advocacy folks. If you have any advice for folks how they can involve themselves in either a local project or some of those bigger amorphous projects like the Seattle Transportation Plan. If there's anything you think's not obvious that they can do beyond just the normal fill out a survey, that kind of participation, but advice to advocates if you have any, because we definitely hope this is an inflection point. We'd love it to be for our climate, for our lives, and just having better, fuller lives in Seattle. Okay, so one guy's opinion, and when I've said these things on Twitter, people really don't like it, but you asked, so I'm just going to tell you honestly, like at least from the seat that I'm in. I'm trying to make it so we use the modal boards, the bike board, the ped board, the transit board, the freight board, as opportunities to daylight how project designs have advanced and what are the new elements or the refinements that have been made during that advancing. And there's a strategy behind that. It's that every stakeholder gets access to the same information at the same time and has an opportunity to start involving themselves in it, rather than some privileged stakeholders getting kind of backdoor access to how the design is evolving. So even if in the past you may or may not have found attending the modal boards useful, they're going to be more useful in 2023. And so I really invite folks to get involved there. That's going to be a very active space for getting the freshest information about how projects are evolving. And I would ask, it's just one guy's opinion, but saying they don't care, they meaning your officials, we really do. And it doesn't help my staff engage on your issue to say they don't care. They really, really do care. And it isn't easy making change in government, I'll tell you. I mean, I think of myself, I'm sort of like a innovator in a change. I'm an innovator in an innovation stifling family of bureaucracies. Not Seattle in particular, just big city local government in general. It's hard. And we need to continue to renew our passion as public officials and all the way down to my line level staff. So just because something has turned out in a way you disagree with, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's very callous, uncaring person on the other end, because really I've never seen the kind of commitment and passion that I have at the SDOT staff. I feel so blessed, and
I'd only met a handful of the people when I accepted this job, but I feel so blessed now to have joined an agency where people hustle like they're working in a high tempo private sector environment. I mean, there's tremendous commitment and passion. There's a million ways we could be better, but you can rest assured that people really, really care about safety and mobility and sustainability at SDOT.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And we would love to walk the streetcar route with you in coming months. We'll be in touch about that, and we'll put that out to maybe some of our followers if they're interested in that kind of tour. We might be able to put something together. And thanks for walking the Capitol Hill pedestrians walk with us as well. We appreciate that on the ground presence.
It was cool too to do a walk around Lid I-5. I find that very fascinating too.
Yeah, we're trying to put something together with Lit I-5, so maybe we can team up on that. A lot of cool projects that hopefully can start getting out of the dreamy phase and into the implementation phase sooner rather than later. But a lot of projects that we're on. So I know we got a line of funding and all that, but yeah, thanks for all of that, and thanks all for joining us, and have a great night.